Hi guys, this is Paul with TweakTown. We're here at Storage Visions 2015. Right now I'm sitting down with one of the top analysts in the data center area, and his name is Robin Harris. He is a contributor at ZDNet, and he also runs Storage Mojo. Kind of one of the big trends that we've seen developing lately is a lot of Chinese ODMs and ODMs in general developing white box solutions. A lot of people think that they can deploy those into just any size data center or any size application. How do you feel their role fits into the current data center environment?
Well, I think it's complicated because there's the organizational issues and there are the technical issues, and I don't think a lot of organizations have the people who can really configure and manage these white box solutions very easily. They all basically, and the issue isn't the hardware, because the hardware is the same hardware that Amazon and Facebook use. The issue is the software. But the other issue, the organizational issue, is really how do you justify it to your CFO? Because the upfront costs are lower than a proprietary solution, but the real benefit, because most of these white box solutions are scale out, the real benefit comes over time as your data keeps growing. But CFOs are very used to hearing promises about great improvements far in the future. They want great improvements right now, and that's a problem, getting that capital authorization request approved by the CFO. So anyway, I think there's a technical issue. I think a lot of the software, especially the really popular buzzworthy stuff like Hadoop and MongoDB and those kinds of things, they're a little more complicated to put together than I think a lot of especially mid-size IT departments are ready to deal with.
And I think that one of the primary motivators for people deploying OEM solutions is a lot of the hand-holding, and they get a lot of assistance if they need it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week support. And we're looking and seeing a lot of popularity and a lot of excitement about movements such as Facebook's OCP and open source designs. Could that leave vendors, or customers in a bad position?
Well, I think you have to understand that this is a maturing market, and it's a very young market today. What I see happening is that today storage is still basically a vertically integrated industry. So basically the integrators, the EMCs and the NetApps of the world, are integrating Intel CPUs and whatever operating system they use and all their data management functionality and the devices, cabinets, and then wrapping it all with services and stuff. And what the white box people are really talking about is going from this vertical model to a horizontal model. So we did that in servers in the 1980s, where instead of you buying your server and your database and your network from DEC or Data General, you would buy your CPUs, came from Intel by way of, let's say, Dell or whoever, and then you would put a Microsoft operating system on top of that, and then an Oracle database on top of that, and your applications. And so that was the horizontal model. And so and the power of that was that each layer could focus on what they did best, get massive volumes, dramatically reduce costs, and drive the entire mini-computer industry into a ditch. And it was very successful. And that's the impulse behind this whole white box progression. But the problem is that, you can criticize Microsoft for the quality of Microsoft operating systems, but it was good enough. And I don't think anybody has come out and clearly been good enough for a small IT shop to to basically do this entire vertical integration. There's still a lot of knobs and levers and switches, and then of course there's a lot of issues around, gee, it maybe scales in capacity, but does it necessarily scale in performance? How do you configure it so that you really can scale in performance? And that's where people like Nutanix, who are doing the hyper-converged systems, they're doing that integration. So yeah, you can start with a 3-node Nutanix and grow it to 1,500 nodes, and it'll scale. So it's not clear to me that that we're really going to go horizontal for this kind of infrastructure, because fundamentally your data is much more valuable than CPU cycles or network stuff, because it's your data. And is the industry, are the software people going to be able to create something that is even as robust as Windows Server was in 95, but the equivalent for your data? And I know a lot of people are working on it.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a lot of money to be made if they, if and when they succeed. But that's really the question, to my mind.
And one thing that's interesting to me, and it's kind of on a different tack here, but it seems over the last few decades we've seen a lot of storage migrating out of the server. Everybody's wanting to put it on SANs and get it farther away from the server, so they have centralized data services that are fed into each individual server. And now we're seeing this migration almost of storage back into the server. We're seeing vSAN and EMC and everybody's working on these new implementations that are bringing it back in. Do you foresee that kind of overtaking the SAN market, or do you foresee those type of architectures moving forward on a massive scale as we go?
Well, I think the SAN architecture does make sense for a subset of the market, and it always will. However, the movement you're talking about of really bringing the data in, and like in-memory databases, and then ultra DIMMs with terabyte capacity, so you can have lots of terabytes of data in a server, actually reflects a fundamental reality that people have not been dealing with for the last 50 years, which is it's the data that's really central. And we've been very much in a CPU-centric or a network-centric sort of architectural vision. But the reality is, it's your data that's the most important thing in your infrastructure, and the infrastructure should be built around your data. Your data should not be somehow a plug-in to the rest of your infrastructure. And I first started seeing this in geophysical probably 20 years ago, where they'd have relatively huge amounts of data 20 years ago, small by today's standards, and they'd have these pipelines where they were actually spending more time transferring data between systems than they were analyzing the data. And basically, when you start looking at the Internet of Things, big data, you've got the exact same problem, only it's a lot worse because the amount of data is much larger. So centralizing the infrastructure around the data is the ultimate, I think, architectural goal. Has somebody come up with a good way to do that yet? They're working on it.
Yeah, definitely. And in the world of data center storage continues to evolve, and you can see some of Robin's thoughts on that on ZDNet and also over at Storage Mojo. We appreciate you taking the time to stop by the booth. Thanks.
My pleasure, Paul.